Hey everyone, it's Misbah on Talk with Misbah. Today we're talking about something big, protests in Gaza. But not just the protests you see in news headlines. I want to show you what's usually hidden, what the world often ignores. You'll hear stories, politics, risks, and what they mean for all of us. We'll cover three key things people overlook: the local mood inside Gaza, hope and fear, how governments are using protests politically, and the global media's framing, what gets shown and what doesn't. By the end, you'll see the protests in a new light. You'll know what's under the surface. Let's get started. To understand what's happening now, we need a quick history. Gaza has been under intense conflict for years. The latest war escalated after October 7, 2023, when Hamas attacked, killing many and taking hostages. Israel responded with a military campaign. Over time, civilian areas suffered. Infrastructure was destroyed. Many international attempts at ceasefire were made. Some held briefly, others failed. Protests in Gaza are not new, but in 2025, something changed. People inside Gaza, even under blockade and constant danger, began protesting against Hamas itself, calling for change, for leadership accountability, for life. These weren't just pro-Palestine protests, they were internal demands. That dual tension, resistance from outside, dissent from inside, makes the current protests different. On top of that, famine, medical shortages, displacement, malnutrition, those are daily realities. Any protest must be seen against those harsh facts. Now, with a fragile ceasefire in place, protests gained new energy. People shout not just for war to end, but for change. That's where much of what's ignored lies. Inside Gaza, many feel worn down. Fatigue is real. Months of war, repeated destruction, losses, and no stable peace wear on hope. Some see the recent protest as a signal: I will not be silent. They demand rights, safety, and leadership that delivers. But many also fear repercussions. Protest against Hamas can be dangerous: arrests, suppression, or worse. In fact, media reports mention that some protesters have been detained or punished by local authorities. Few outlets cover those risks inside Gaza. And these voices are often muted or absent in global news. We see images of crowds, but we don't always hear the whispers in homes. Am I safe? What if this backfires? Will they demolish our street next? Real change demands leadership accountability. People are not just reacting to Israel, they are reacting to governance, to failures in services, to neglect within their own systems. Understanding this mood helps us see these protests not as a monolith, but as a mix of pain, anger, cautious hope, all in one. Governments see protests not only as moral pressure, but as tools. Spain, for example, recently passed a law to ban arms exports to Israel. That's not just solidarity, it's a message, a policy shift backed by protest momentum. Some states use protests to pressure diplomacy, to shift alliances, or to reposition in global forums. On the flip side, some governments worry protests may fuel instability or complicate alliances. Even inside nations, protests abroad can affect domestic politics. Leaders may face pressure from constituencies, from media, from civil society to adjust foreign policy. So protests are rarely just people in streets. They interact with governments, diplomats, parties, NGOs. This double role, protest as voice, protest as leverage, is often ignored. What stories get told? What images show up?
What words are used? Many outlets emphasize leadership statements, ceasefire deals, diplomatic moves. Fewer focus on individual suffering, victory delayed, the protests' grassroots. Some frames reduce protesters to mob or crowd. Others spotlight violence more than demands. Media choice shapes public perception. If headlines focus on Israel's response or Hamas statements, the local voice recedes. Also, media often repeat government talking points. We rarely see the internal critic voices or the contradictory narratives. What if the media showed both peace negotiations and protest risks, both policy shifts and local voices? Then people might see tension, not a simple hero versus villain.
Around the world, the response has been strong. Mass protests in Europe, South America, Middle East. Governments have spoken, some supportive, others cautious. The United Nations welcomed the ceasefire agreement and urged all parties to hold to it. Activist and advocacy groups warned that the deal is only the start, not the solution. But reactions vary. Some countries risk trade or diplomatic cost, some voices celebrate bold stances, others fear being dragged into conflict. Also, global media reactions differ. What the U.S. media highlights versus regional media in Middle East or Asia. This global reaction shapes whether protests stay local, become regional, or influence diplomacy. The ceasefire or protests may collapse. If one side violates terms, distrust returns. Inside, protests might be suppressed, reprisals by local or militant groups. Governments may back out of human rights promises. Funds or aid may get blocked. The peace deal may be used to justify harsh policies later. Misinformation is also a big threat. False stories, manipulated images, spin, all distort truth. If global attention fades, protests lose leverage. These risks are real and often under-discussed. Here's what I watch. Whether protests scale down or grow internally, if governments pass policies like arms bans following protest waves, how media coverage changes, whether local voices get spotlight, whether ceasefire holds or breaks, if humanitarian aid flows consistently. My guess, we'll see cycles, protest, diplomacy, backlash, repeat. But for the first time, voices inside Gaza demanding accountability could shift balance. So, what the world ignores: internal voices of Gaza, protest as political tool, and media framing. These protests are more than moments. They may define how change really begins. I want to hear from you. Which ignored piece struck you hardest? Write it in comments. If you want daily analysis like this, subscribe. I'll keep showing what's under the surface. Thank you for listening. Stay alert, stay human. Talk with Misbah. Until next time.